go, guys. Welcome back to What's the Hazard? This is Doug Fletcher. It is February 25th, Friday here in Omaha, Nebraska. Colder than shit this morning.
Zero.
Can I get
Zero coming
Can
up
I get
the
an
road.
amen on that? Oh, my God. It was freezing this morning. And I'm a pretty cold-tolerant guy, but, man, this was a little different. I took my dog Chuck out this morning to go to the restroom, or I guess we'd call it the restroom. It's my front yard, actually. And he just looked at me, turned around, went right back inside. So I'm afraid of what I'm going to come back to this afternoon when I get home. But, hey, you're listening to What's the Hazard? This is our podcast about workplace safety and health. I've got a new friend in the studio this morning, Alex Rourke. We have actually just met literally a few minutes ago. I came to know of you through LinkedIn.
Yep.
Actually, we're part of a safety group on LinkedIn, and you had posted something that I found very interesting, and so I just kind of reached out to you, and you agreed to come up and talk about it. I appreciate that, man.
Yep.
You are the safety coordinator for White Castle Roofing here in Nebraska.
Yep.
Or regionally. I'm sure White Castle is all over the country at this point. Seems like you're enormous, but I would like to hear a little bit about how you got into safety, man. How you're a young guy.
Yeah.
You are the target audience for this podcast, truthfully, and so I'm interested to see how you got into it, how it's going, what you think of it.
Well, I got into safety. I've been at White Castle since June of 2020, so I'm definitely new to safety as a full-time gig. Prior to White Castle, I worked for the city in Lincoln as an equipment operator, and the last year I was there, I kind of took over safety duties at our shop, doing trainings, PPE, kind of inspections, incident management, that sort of thing. On the flip side, I also have been a volunteer with Lincoln Lancaster County Emergency Management for almost 8 years now, which is really similar. It's what I went to school for. I had my bachelor's degree in emergency management. It's the same thing. It's about recognizing hazards and mitigating them or responding to them. Same thing as safety.
Yeah, man. Interesting.
And when I was at the city, I was just looking for a change. White Castle was looking for safety coordinator. I started in June, which is prime roofing season, so I really hit the ground running. I mean,
Right.
I had... with day two, first
you can't say hit the ground in the roofing business necessarily.
Day two, first injury. Day three, we had one of our guys total a truck, and it was they were surprised I made it past my first week.
Yeah.
But it's been a learning experience. I mean, I was an EMT 10 years ago prior to moving to Lincoln, so I had kind of the safety mindset. Came to White Castle, and they had, I wouldn't say an issue with injuries, but it was routine. Injuries happened a lot. And it was a learning process, trying to find that balance between first learning how they were handling things and then best way to manage them. And so we went from 20 injuries in 2020 to 5 injuries in 2021, lowering our total incident recordable rate down to a 3.0, which is industry average for roofing.
That's fantastic, man. And as you said, you kind of came in mid-year in 2020, so you didn't really have a lot to do with that first half of the year.
And it was hard because I didn't want to come out like guns blazing, being that hard-ass safety guy where I'm just here to write you up and that kind of thing. I knew a lot about roofing before, but I didn't want to come in, oh, here's that outsider telling us what to do. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of observing everything, finding my niche. And I never really wanted to be, like, I kind of knew safety, what it was, but I didn't want to be that safety enforcement. I wanted to be safety as a learning process. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, write-ups they're inevitable, but it's not my go-to thing. If there's an issue, I'd rather figure out the root cause and address it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. And that's an interesting comment, because in the construction world particularly, that's often not the case. I think in the construction sector, policing is often how we approach safety.
Yep, it is. And sometimes,
I think that's a mistake.
It's been difficult. There's a couple GCs we've worked with here, one in Omaha in particular. I happened to be on site that day watching the crew do something, and he came up and he literally pulled out what looked like a ticket book and started writing them up. They were too close to the edge, and I was like, well, hang on, let's talk about this. And he goes, nope. Kicked him off the job site for 2 days, and he wouldn't address it. He wouldn't let me address it. And I said, if it was a serious safety issue, it would have been like I would have handled it. But the fact that you'd rather go straight to finding somebody and kicking him off the job site, that all it's going to do is piss people off, and it doesn't address what you saw as the violation, when in reality, it was kind of in one of those gray area things where he was working on a roof, and he was at a warning line, and he lifted up the warning line to spray adhesive on the roof. Didn't step across it, but lifted it up. And to him, that was a violation. And to me, I'm like, well,
I think you could argue that.
yeah, I mean, what are you trying to accomplish with safety? Is safety, in my goal, you're trying to make sure everybody goes home. You're not trying to make sure things like catch people. It's not the gotcha attitude. I mean, I think you've said it before where having a day with no violations is a good day. It means you're doing something right. It's approaching it the way that you ensure, like a day, like a boring day is a good day in safety.
Absolutely.
I mean, so
yeah, uneventful. We like
Yeah.
things uneventful.
and
That's true.
It's been a challenge sometimes. Like there's some GCs that are easier to work with. I mean, we do on our commercial side, we deal with general contractors a lot, and some are easy to deal with. Their safety guy will call me, hey Alex, we got a problem. Other ones, they want to kind of grandstand about it and be like, hey, and email half their management team and say, oh, you guys are violating this. I'm like, oh, well, who isn't? But
that's absolutely true. I see that all the time.
Yep.
I love that phrase grandstanding because that's often what it seems like when they're shouting and waving their hands and stop or
Yep.
There were safety guys in the old days that used to make a point out of going around and just cutting bad cords and doing all of this grandstanding shit that I think is ridiculous, frankly.
yeah, and it does. I don't think, and like I said, I think it makes people more angry, and so you don't want to be the safety guy that everybody hides from. I mean, I don't think any of my crews will say, "Oh, Alex is coming. We got to fix everything now." I mean, I usually go and I'll spend a couple hours. I can spend a couple hours on a big job site and just watch, hang out, help, whatever it is, to just kind of be there and see what they're doing, and if there's issues, address them, but not just show up and immediately start yelling or cutting cords or anything like that.
Right. Well, this is kind of the paradigm that we've been preaching for a couple of years on this program is that, we need to figure out a way to provide a quality product as safely as possible or produce, provide a quality service as safely as possible, whatever that is. It's not always about compliance. I mean, compliance is an important part of it to the extent that we're able to be compliant, but that's not the end of what we're trying to accomplish.
And there's times I sit there, especially like laying in bed or driving back from somewhere, and I think about like, well, there's things I should be doing and other things I can be doing better. But what comes down to it is if I'm reducing the injury rate and nobody's getting hurt, I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, if the less injuries we have, I mean, that's at the end of the day, as long as you go home, you might go home tired and sore, but as long as you're not hurt, that's the end goal of every day.
Yeah.
So
I would agree, man. Leave in one piece.
Yeah.
That is the goal.
So it's been an interesting ride, and it's definitely fun. It's funny, like you said, I'm young to safety. I'm new to safety. And you go in places, and sometimes you see there. It's an interesting mix. There's a lot of senior guys in safety, and there's a lot of up and coming new guys in safety. And it was funny. I actually first got an introduction to safety. It was probably back in 2015 through emergency management. I was taking an incident safety officer class through FEMA in Lincoln, and I was the youngest person in the class by probably 30 years. But it was also fantastic in the point where there was 20 people in this room there's probably 500 years experience in this room, everywhere from industrial safety to a lot of emergency safety like fire services and that kind of thing. And the number one takeaway I learned in that class was you don't have to know everything, but you have to know somebody, or you have to know how to get it. So
that's how I've made my entire career, man. Just know the guy that knows.
You don't need to know every regulation and everything, but having access to it or knowing where to look and getting it quickly. Or if somebody asks, hey, do you know this? I don't know, but I can figure it out. I mean,
so let me ask you a question, man. So in 1 year's time, you basically dropped your incident rate, your recordable incident rate at White Castle from 20 incidents that first 6 months, essentially,
Really,
but that year, the calendar year 2020, which was an odd year. And then 2021, you said you had 5.
Yep.
You can't do much in that time period. What did you do, you think, that made a big difference?
There was a couple things. One, we implemented a telehealth option as kind of our first response to injuries. We signed up with a service called Ortho Live, where they would essentially do a FaceTime for an injury. So you're going to put your employee either on the phone face to face with an OSHA trained athletic trainer or an orthopedist. a lot of those injuries, I mean, if it's a laceration or an obvious broken bone, yeah, this is how we're going to treat it. But there's a lot of those injuries where, hey, my knees bother me, my back's hurting. What do I do? And you got to find that balance between, I need to get them treated, but I don't want to treat them too hard too early where it's going to take them off work for 2 weeks immediately if I take them to urgent care, or make it a recordable. So with OrthoLive, I can set it up within, the longest I've had to wait is 45 minutes to get an appointment. They meet with the person, they'll run them through a quick medical history, range of motion, find out about it. They can give them recommendations, like usually it's a RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation, and then they can do follow-ups. So 24 hours a day, even if it's somebody out in the field, I just got their information, send it to them. They'll visit the specialist online, and then they'll get a diagnosis, a treatment plan, follow-ups, and it's not recordable and it's not a workers' comp injury. So we use that probably 24 times, and
with good success.
With good success, yeah. And it was remarkable. I mean, a lot of people were pretty apprehensive, especially some of our older guys, that say, "Hey, we're gonna meet with the doctor online," and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And it works out because you get that feeling where we're making sure they're being treated, but not jumping the gun. And then if OrthoLive decides that they need to be seen, then we'll go the traditional route. We'll take them to an orthopedic person or a chiropractor or whatever necessary.
Like a local occupational health provider or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And
so how did you get the guys to tell you about, I mean, this is an early intervention strategy, obviously. Yep. How did you get the guys to report this stuff? How did you convince them to come forward and tell you about it? Were they pretty good about that?
Yes and no. I mean, some of it was a foreman, like a foreman or superintendent, be like, "Hey, this guy says my back hurts or my knee's killing me today." Other times it's when I'm out on a job site and like, "Hey," they'll just make a comment like, "Hey, my knee's bothering me." It's like, let's get you checked out. Well, I don't know if I need to. Let's just get it done now. So it puts it on paper, so we know further down the road it becomes a more serious issue, or we can address it quickly now, and it doesn't have to be a problem.
Right.
I mean, so
right.
We'll figure it out now.
I like that.
And there was two people I dealt with. One was, he was 55, old guy, been roofing forever, and he hated it. He didn't want to do anything with technology. I mean, I'm sure this was his first smartphone in the last year, and he hated it. Another guy was a younger kid, and he's like, "No, I need to go to urgent care. I think I broke my hand," and he didn't. But once he was dead set, "I'm going to go to urgent care," it was.
Then you really can't refuse him that, probably.
No, he's like, "Well, then we'll take you where we normally go."
Okay.
And a lot of it was just making my presence known, I think, and kind of addressing our issues. Some of our biggest issues in 2020 were we had 2 bad ladder falls. One was before I started, and that was a significant one. Another one was late in December, and that was almost kind of a freak accident where a guy had set up a ladder on a deck, and those composite decks get slick, and you don't even realize it, and the ladder slipped. And so that's what I hit hard last year was we're not going to have any ladder injuries, and we didn't. We had no falls, we had no ladder injuries. All of our stuff was material handling. And even some of them were just basic, like one guy dropped a sheet of plywood on his foot.
Yeah.
He had steel toes on, but it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, so I like that. So one of the things that I encourage a lot of my clients to do is then, look at your injuries, look at your 300 logs, and pick something. Just pick something, a contributing factor or an issue like you just described, ladders, and really go hard at it. I think there's a lot of residual benefit to that. Even though you're focusing on the ladder safety, there are, the mindset, you're changing that because of that intense focus or that emphasis, whatever. So, pick one and go after it, man. Eye injuries, hand injuries, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I think there are residual benefits to that.
We introduced a safety incentive program last year, which I know it's one of those things OSHA's always kind of frowned upon, and we did it. So we had to kind of pick what we did, and we use an app called Company Cam to kind of manage everything, where you document everything throughout the day. And so our basic one was, if your whole crew takes these pictures every week, so if you're on a shingle crew, I need to see pictures of your anchors, your ropes, and your ladder Monday through Friday. And if you do that, your whole crew will get $10 each in safety bucks that can be used towards this one website to buy branded gear.
So I've not heard of this before, and I love it. So go through that again. You called it Company Cam?
Company Cam. It was actually started by Luke Hansen, Mike Hansen started White Castle with Steve Biegert. and he has three sons, Mike, Luke, and Dane. Luke is his oldest. About 10 years ago, they were looking for a way to manage photos and documents, mostly photos, as a contractor. And so Luke developed Company Cam and has now become a public app that...
So this is something I could use?
Oh, yeah. Dozens of contractors use it. Roofers love it. So it starts from when your salesman goes out to his first job, like to sell a roof, he'll take pictures of the house, and it's an app. It's almost similar to a social media app. He'll take pictures of the house, and then it's viewable on anybody who has the app that's logged into your company's account can see it. And then when the crew goes out, they clock in, they show up the app, like you take pictures at that job site, and it's tagged geolocation. And then if they take pictures, you can tag people just like social media. You can write comments on it and tag somebody. So if I can sit on my phone and see all our crews across the state, and I can see if they have an issue, I can write a note that says, hey, you need to address this right now. Tag them. It'll immediately notify them, just like any other
And what
app.
are you so talk about that incentive program. What were you asking them to provide you?
So on a regular job site, so if there were shingle crew, make sure every day you need to take pictures of your anchors, or your crew roped up, and your ladder 3 feet up and tied off.
Right.
Basics. Just the basics. And then if you're on a flat roof crew, same thing. Show me your guardrail system, your warning lines, and then your ladder too.
And they would do that daily?
And as long as they did that all 5 days, the whole crew would get $10 each in safety bucks at the end of the week.
Love it.
And
Love
some crews really bought into it. Some crews didn't. But I think it did make a difference. And it made them think just, hey, they're watching, so we got to take these pictures every day. And I think that helped a lot too.
I love that, man.
And it was trying to find, like, originally, like, somebody in our leadership team said, well, why don't we just reward them for not having injuries? I said, well, that's the big thing we can't do.
Yeah, truly, that's the one thing that OSHA is trying to discourage people from doing is the
underreporting.
Yes, it discourages that
that's
potential
absolutely
underreporting.
what we can't do. It has to be.
But I think what you're doing is absolutely
reinforcement.
acceptable, man. Positive reinforcement, encouraging those good behaviors. That's really good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and it was fun. There's some guys who get really excited about it, other guys, and I mean, either A, wouldn't take them or would just pass them to somebody else in their crew. At the end of the year when they were buying stuff with them, one thing that did kind of suck is when they bought stuff because of everything else and shipping delays, it was an immediate gratification. Like it took a while to get the products they ordered. But, I mean, there's everything from T-shirts to DeWalt tool sets to Carhartt gear. So you earn enough. I mean.
Through the company store this was like.
Yep. It's through a company called Sportech Safety, and a lot of big companies use them. And it's the same idea. And so, as a company, you don't even have to pay. We don't pay them anything. I mean, for the web store, we don't. All you have to do is pay for shipping on the actual sport safety buck coupons. I mean, you don't pay anything until somebody buys something. I love it. So it was almost stupid easy.
No, that's fantastic, man.
Do it. And no, like, what's the risk?
Yeah.
I mean. Even if it gets one guy to start buying in better.
Completely.
So
I completely agree. So, wow, this is really good, man. This is one I hadn't even expected. This is fantastic. I want to talk about two things. Number one, you've been doing roofing, and roofing has traditionally been a pretty challenging industry.
Yep.
As a former OSHA guy, I can remember in 2010 when the agency changed the regulations for fall protection in residential roofing from the old day, the old alternative guidelines when we allowed roof jacks, slide guards, and that was it. If you were lucky, if a guy pounded a 2x4 in the eave, to, post 2010, the residential guys had to follow the same rules as the commercial guys. And man, everything went to shit. That was insane. I can remember going around the state of Nebraska giving instruction to these different roofing groups, MOBA and some of the other the house, the home builders and stuff, and just telling them that we were basically changing their lives. It was difficult, and there was a lot of resentment. So I would like to know, technically, what is the most difficult aspect of safety technically, and then talk about administration. And what are the challenges that you face with, like, having these multiple crews out all over the region administering a safety program?
technically, I think some of it is, I don't know if it's buy-in. I think it's doing it. I mean, we have a lot of roofers and some superintendents who've been doing it the 20, 30 years. So they started the before we kind of did the safety, this regulations for them to kind of follow it. And then, well, if they're not doing it, why do we have to do it? Is our biggest issue. And so that, like, they all know the safety. I mean, they all get trained on it. They all get tested on it, and they know I check on it. But there's definitely kind of sometimes there can be a disconnect between, like, I know management, White Castle's, like, we don't have a set safety budget. If it's something that we need to do for safety, we do it. The management team, our CEO, COO, safety, it gets done. All the new guys, they know safety, they understand safety. And sometimes there's some of those old superintendents who is like, yeah, we know how to do it, but they push productivity over safety.
Sure.
And that's where I struggle sometimes. It's one of the difficulties I find. It's like, well, what am I going out there to do if they're not going to reinforce the same things I am? But it's getting better. I mean, I will say I've been stopped multiple times when I check, especially on shingle job sites, where a homeowner or a neighbor will be like, you're the only crew I see wearing ropes and harnesses on a roof. And that's rewarding. I mean,
have you found, because in the old days, and I'm going to say the old days, 10 years ago, the argument was always, the unequal playing field. If we're doing this, the cost to us is different than the cost to the company that's not doing this. And there was a lot of pushback as a result of that. But it's obvious that White Castle has embraced this and has absorbed that cost somehow. Yep.
I mean, we've gone back and forth with subcontracting some shingle jobs, and some of our subcontractors, that's what they'll approach us, be like, well, none of our other contractors make us wear it. And it's like, well, we pay you more to do it. I mean, so if you don't want to do it, then we're just not going to hire you. And most of them realize that. We've had some that they come, don't want to do it, and they leave. Other ones, there's a couple we've had for years, and they do it. I mean, they don't always do it well. Like, I know if we show up on a job site, they'll all have harnesses on and have ropes on the roof. They might not be connected, and I'll get it back on. And then there's times, I mean, by the time I hit the truck, I can hear those ropes hitting the roof. And
right.
I try my best, but for the most part, I mean, they do it.
So the other part of this is you're working with grown men who know their business. They certainly know how to put roofs on, tear them off, put them back on. They know that shit. And so I agree. That is an incredible challenge to manage that, right? I mean, keep them focused on it, appreciate the importance of it, appreciate the risk. I mean, guys that do this for a living don't feel the same risk that I do when I'm on my roof.
Right.
Like a cat, dug into the shingles,
I mean, that's like, they'll be on the 412, 612, even 812 roof, and they're running up and down it. And then they'll, like, everybody will say it impedes them. It slows them down. It's like, yeah, it does. I mean, like any 412 roof, you can play basketball up there. And once they start hitting 10, 12, 12, 12 and up, then they're pretty much always roped off at that point. And even it surprises me sometimes. I'll show up at a 12, 12 job and there's guys running around on the peak with no ropes on. I'm like, you're nuts. But it's one of those things where you can't approach them like mom and dad, hey, you need to do this or else. Sometimes you have to approach them as, why you should do this, kind of. Explain to them, here's why. I mean, what if you do fall? It's kind of the what if. And just kind of play that game. You got to find, so some guys respond better to being yelled at, I guess. Some guys respond better to just chatting with them privately and reason and figuring it out. I mean, and then there's some guys who just aren't going to do it. And usually we'll just part ways with them at that point. I mean,
there's somebody would hire them.
Yeah.
They can work somewhere.
Yeah. So, and then the commercial guys, it's hard to, I think one of the hardest issues as roofers is they'll be on a big job site and I get calls all the time, you guys aren't wearing hard hats. And I'm like, I tell my guys, I know you're on the roof, nothing's above you, but you still need to wear a hard hat on their job site. Right. Well, what's going to hit us? Oh, we had that a couple years ago. We were out doing a big 2,000 square roof in Hastings, and one of the guys was doing some flashing under a AC unit and stood up too fast and whacked his head and got a laceration.
Yeah.
So there is reasons you do wear it. I mean, and sometimes you can, if you explain to the GC, like, hey, it's 95 degrees out there, it's really not doing anything. If they're going to be bending over and stuff, we'll make sure it's on. But if they're just running back and forth on the roof,
Right.
Let's try and work it out.
I get that. I do get that, man. Absolutely. It is hard to sell that in the absence of a hazard, you know? And I know from the standpoint of managing a program, it's much easier that if you walk onto the site, you put all this PPE on. Mm-hmm. You know, you walk through the gate, you've got your hard hat on, get out of your truck, put your hard hat on. I get that. It makes it much easier to manage as a GC probably, but I think to some degree it defeats us a little bit as, you know, identify a hazard, assess the risk, you know, mitigate.
Yep.
And if we've removed that from the equation, I think to some degree we are doing a disservice to our employees at times. So I'm not an over safety guy all the time. I don't love over safetying things necessarily unless it's really indicated. And I think that's a circumstance where, you know, you're pounding lath in the ground to lay out a job and you've got your hard hat on.
It's just going to fall off if you're bending over all the time.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. Yeah. It is a tough one.
One of the funny ones or difficult ones was it was summer 2020. We were doing a big job site up here in Omaha, and it was kind of when masks were really starting to get pushed. And the GC said, "You guys need to be wearing masks." I was like, "It's 95 degrees outside. They're up on the roof. No other trades are around them. Why should they wear masks? That's a danger because you're risking your heat injury at that point." Mm-hmm. Well, they need to be wearing masks. I was like, it's the same crew working with each other. There's nobody else around. If somebody else comes around, we can put masks on. And he goes, well, if they're working around each other, they should have masks. I was like, they ride up in a truck from home or Lincoln all the way up here together. They're the same 4 or 6 guys. And so I finally just said, it's almost more of a safety hazard to put that mask on when it's that hot. If another trade is around or if your inspectors are around, yeah, we'll put them on. But you got to think about your alternatives. I mean, your risk is already there. It's not getting worse by them not wearing them. And B, you're also increasing significant risk in that heat injury. And I know that's going to becoming a bigger issue. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's going to be. Yeah. I mean, it looks like.
Hear the rumblings from OSHA. That's their next big focus is.
Right. Which is really scary, man, because you know, within the regulatory community or even the consensus communities, the ACGIH and some of those other organizations, they view heat exposure much more aggressively or intently than those of us that actually work outdoors. Yeah. You know, and I'm a little bit worried about what they come up with.
Yeah, if they come up with some of those regulations that say you can't work over this heat, over this temperature, certain temperature or heat index, I mean, that could debilitate us.
Oh, absolutely.
Something like that. I mean, that's all of July and August. I mean, what do we do?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you can kind of do that early work. You can try and come in pre-dawn and do some stuff, but then it's hard to roof in the dark.
It is.
So,
not to mention, you know, well, I do know, I can remember that when we started, you know, enforcing the fall protection guidelines a little bit more stringently when I was with OSHA, you noticed that the roofers were working in the non-8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday hours. They were working evenings, weekends, when the OSHA guys weren't working. It was just this little cat and mouse kind of thing we played for a little while. I think it's easier just to try to do the best you can and comply to the extent that you are able. Yeah. You know, the majority of the time, and things work themselves out. But
yeah, I mean, that's like you said, you play the game. I mean, you can't always do everything to the letter of the law necessarily.
Right. Totally agree.
You got to kind of find that balance between compliance and reality and best interest.
Yes.
I mean, if they're being mostly compliant, they're not getting hurt, and OSHA does show up, you can kind of have that conversation. Well, here's our history of this. Haven't had an issue. Here's where we're at. They're mostly compliant, and you kind of hopefully you can get some understanding, I guess.
I would agree. Yeah, and I completely agree with everything that you just said. I think that is the balance that we have to strike. And when we refer to this as a game, we don't mean to minimize the potential risk or harm that an injury could cause, but to some degree it is a game of sorts that, you know, we are trying to appear as compliant as possible because that's what OSHA is focused on, compliance, unfortunately. That's what they do. Our interest is just making sure these employees are safe and, you know, going home in one piece, and that's what we're trying to do, and we have to strike that balance. It can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, there's times it's, well, do this. Well, why do I need to do that? Well, it's because that's what they tell us we need to do. Well, who tells you that? Well, OSHA, and you guys know who OSHA is. Some of them get it, and other guys, it's like, well, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And so it's if you can't approach it with a hammer, you got to kind of approach it with soft hands.
It does take a nuanced approach, I think.
Yeah.
Well, so the technical side is interesting to me, but I think the technical side is oftentimes easier than the actual management side, the administrative side. And so you came up with something that I found very interesting. This is what I saw on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Talk about that. It's an old, kind of a relatively new solution to an old problem.
So when I started at White Castle, our SDS management was lackluster. I mean, I had a box of a bunch of SDS sheets, didn't have a binder, didn't have anything anywhere. And so I started tracking down stuff during the summer, but obviously during the prime roofing season, I don't have a lot of free time. So once winter hit, I did a full inventory of our entire warehouse and everything we use and all our products. I mean, the nice thing is on our commercial side, we only install Carlisle brand products, so it's easy. Tracked down all of it, created a Google Drive folder or multiple folders into an SDS inventory of everything we use. Been kind of sitting on it for a year, told everybody, here's how we get to SDS. You got to get on Google Drive. Anybody who works in the company should have access to it. And then about a month and a half ago, one of our superintendents says, hey, Alex, can we get copies of the SDS sheets in the job boxes that sit on our job sites for commercial or our commercial job sites up on the roof? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, these job boxes can sit up there for a year, sit out in the elements. Paper SDS sheets aren't going to work. So I kind of pondered about it, and I was like, how do I get access online? And so I went to a website, created a QR code that provided access to our Google Drive folder, and then messaged, we have an in-house graphic designer and vinyl printer, and I said, hey, can you print me off decals of this QR code? And that provides everybody access to it. And so we started putting these QR decals in every job box. So all it takes is anybody with a smartphone can scan that QR code, and it'll pull up your Google Drive folder, and you can either search for the name of the product or go by residential, commercial, general, and find that product. And then everybody has access. And some people have said, well, what about job sites that don't have phones? And well, we've only been, anytime we've had phone restrictions, they usually allow one phone. I mean, it's just because we tell them we have to use company cam. Or there are some people who don't have smartphones, and then you got to work around it, and you got to say, well, theoretically, they shouldn't be by themselves, and somebody else around them should have access to it. But everybody's been pretty excited or understanding and gets it.
Right. So let's talk about so I just learned how to scan a menu at a restaurant about a year ago. I was actually having to ask for hard copy, menus, and my kids are looking at me like, you're an idiot. So one of my sons took my phone and pulled up the camera, put it over the QR code, and all of a sudden I had the menu. I was like, this is freaking amazing,
Yeah.
And
you even have one on your water bottle right there.
There is? Oh, hell, there is. What is that going to get me?
Probably access. I don't know if you need an SDS for smart water.
Something to smart water, though?
But
something to smart water.
I mean, I think a lot of it has helped since COVID. The same thing. A lot of people have gotten access to QR. I've seen QR codes in the last year, whether it's, remember we showed up on one job site where we had to do every employee had to do a daily check-in that said, oh, I don't have a fever, I don't have this, and it was scan a QR code when you get on the job site. So I think a lot of people are getting to be...
So every employee had a QR code?
Well, the job site had a sign, so when you came in, you scan the QR code, and it would open up a website, so you put in your name and phone number.
Oh, so you would just complete those questions?
Just complete that.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So tell me how this works. Okay, so you've got all your SDSs in Google Drive, in folders. And then I've got a QR code. How does the QR code get me to this folder? What is the mechanism? Is it an app or a software or something?
No, it opens up your internet browser. So that was a nice thing with Google Drive. You can select kind of your viewing audience, like they have to have the link, have to be logged in. And then, so when I created it, I didn't have the permissions set right. And so I started putting posters out, and somebody goes, hey, Alex, that tells me I need to log in. And so I go, well, I got to figure that out. So I changed the permission. You scan it, it opens your internet browser, and it'll show White Castle SDS inventory.
Gotcha.
And there's commercial, residential, maintenance, and then there's some like random ones like gasoline and that are just loose, and then so you can either, or and there'll be a search bar at the top, on just like Google, so you can either search based on what product you know it is, or you'll go to commercial and pull up the Carlisle list and say, oh, I need that adhesive.
Gotcha.
And I mean, that way you have it. So whether you need to just view it, show it to an emergency responder.
Right. Bring it to the hospital with you, whatever the case might be.
Yep.
Or just interest.
Yep.
Just an employee's interested in knowing what the hazards of that chemical are, perhaps, or.
Which they should be. I mean, we try and tell them, like, especially as foreman, like, you at least should know your primary ones. Like, on the commercial side, your roofing adhesive, you should kind of know some of the general stuff about it since you're working with it daily.
That's kind of what I believe, man. You just know what you've got that's toxic, what's flammable, what's corrosive, just the basics. You don't need to be a chemist.
No.
But those things are valuable. It's important to know. Incompatibilities are important to know. Don't mix this with that, that kind of thing.
And then on the other hand, I updated our HAZCOM plan to reflect that we have this access to it now. And then we need to update our annual HAZCOM. We do an annual HAZCOM refresher, and Shane Unger, comes out and does it. And we've had to postpone a couple times between COVID issues and then with the weather that we're supposed to do this week, and it was so cold nobody worked, so nobody came out. So next week, but I've talked to a lot of the crews about it, so they kind of know it's coming and know what it is.
But for the most part, you've gotten a pretty good response to this. So you got this QR code on the job box. You could put them anywhere. So and I'm not a big thinker, man. Okay, but as I'm envisioning this, there are a lot of applications for this. I mean, we see that out in the world. There are, as you said, there are QR codes everywhere, and so. Anytime you have a document management issue or you want an employee to have access to a form. So I was talking to a buddy of mine, Cody Hoover, over at Jack Links yesterday, and I mentioned that you were coming on today to talk about this QR code thing. And he's like, well, dumbass, we use QR codes for reporting near misses.
Right.
Like in the back of on the door in the toilet stall, there's a QR code. You can be sitting there in the restroom, scan the QR code. Be careful what you're doing with that camera, I guess. Scan the QR code, and it'll pull up a near miss report, an unsafe behavior, unsafe act report. You can fill that out. Or they put them on, on their break room tables. They have all these QR codes for different things. You can open up different documents. You can make these reports. I had some guy tell me the other day that they use QR codes for tracking training. So every employee on the back of their ID has a QR code. And when I do a toolbox talk out in the field, as a supervisor, I can just go around and scan, and I've got all my guys covered that were in the training. Yeah. This is just amazing to me.
I mean, the QR codes on the emergency management side, one of the big things I specialize is we use a system called Salamander, which is a QR code-based system where it's adopted nationally. FEMA adopts it, so you get an ID code or ID card that has a QR code on it. Your equipment gets QR codes. Your fire truck gets a QR code. So when you you have an incident, you can open up the app or website, scan that QR code. I'm on that incident now. So when it comes to the back end, when you try and get that FEMA reimbursement, you have a log of all the time you were on. That person was on scene. So because everything has a value, a person, an engine company, a tool, everything has a value that can be reimbursed. So. And it's just good for tracking. So I've helped out at Husker football games tracking resources where everybody has a QR code. You can put them in an organization chart so you can see where everybody's assigned. So QR codes have become really popular.
So in any small business, small company, you mentioned this in the elevator on the way up, these safety management systems that you can purchase.
Yep, and that's
very expensive, oftentimes prohibitive for most companies.
Yeah, when I looked at kind of how to manage our SDS system, there's tons of those apps and websites and everything out there, but they're expensive. They'll have the base cost, but then if you need the enterprise level where everybody has access to it, call for a quote, and
you're screwed.
Yeah, and the way pretty much we approach everything at White Castle is how much can we do in-house without having to have somebody else do it. If we can build it in-house, let's build it in-house. So, like I said, I've been sitting on this Google Drive folder of SDS sheets, and now the QR code gives everybody that ready access to it.
Yeah. What else can we use this for? Do Do you have anything in mind that you want to? I mean, you could do this for inventory of all your ladders, your fall protection equipment, slings, everything that you have a need to inspect periodically. How do you track that? Paper documentation, nobody does that shit. No. I've been inspecting this shit for 35 years. Nobody does it.
And I definitely think I'm going to do a lot more with it. I mean, we use a system. We use NetSuite now to track just about everything from sales to inventory. We just switched from an old system to a new system over the winter. And the nice thing about it, NetSuite, is you can build everything you want to with it. So like I have the superintendents doing site inspections or their audits with it, then I can pull the data. And then we can also track our inventory with it. But like you said, trying to do inspections, like, I mean, when I did harness inspections a month ago and I had to go through 150 harnesses, I mean, I just did it on paper. I mean, wrote down, and now it's in a Google Sheets or Excel folder file, so I can at least view it and write down all the serial numbers and inspecting, but and then documenting the the damaged harnesses or whatever.
Right.
But
right.
It's definitely one of those things where, especially once everybody understands and adopts it, we can do it for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, for inventory, I mean,
training, inventory,
everything.
Document management. I mean,
98% of people have a smartphone in their pocket.
Yeah.
And it's pretty user-friendly to try and scan a QR code now.
Right.
You used to need an app, and now, I mean, I know Apple does, and I think Android, you just open your camera, and it brings up the QR code. Like there was that Super Bowl commercial where it was just a bouncing QR code, and everybody's wondering what it was, and I'm sure most people scanned it just out of curiosity.
What was it?
I think it was for one of the Bitcoin or...
Oh, was it?
Yeah, one of those...
Well, I have to be honest, man. I thought it was app-driven. I thought I had to have an app, and I tried to download an app once, and then it wouldn't work. And I'd be, there's this restaurant in Denver that my wife and I go to when we're visiting one of our sons, and I could not get the menu, and I was so frustrated by this. I thought I was banging my head on the table, and my kid is like, just open your phone, man.
Yeah.
Or open your camera.
Open your camera.
Open your camera.
I mean, and that was the nice thing about it is with a lot of those the SDS management or safety management apps, you have to have an app for it. You pay for app access, and people forget their passwords, and it updates and that kind of thing. With this, it's web-based, so it's in the cloud through Google, and as long as you have a camera and an internet browser on your phone, you can open it.
You're golden.
Yeah.
And you don't need like Wi-Fi access. You can do this through the G, whatever that is, 4G, 5G. I mean, whatever that stuff is.
Right.
It's up there somewhere.
I mean, they'll say like, well, I've heard before, like OSHA will say, what do you have a backup access plan in case cell service or internet service goes down? It's like, well, in that case, we're all kind of screwed with everything.
Yeah,
if everybody loses cell service, then I don't know.
Yeah, we've got bigger problems.
Yeah. I mean, what do we do? But theoretically, somebody's going to have cell or internet access to get to it.
I mean, that is a frustrating topic for me as well. This, does everyone have reasonable access? Yeah, I think if we're counting on a phone-based system like that, I think it's reasonable to assume that the vast majority of employees will have access. I mean, could you find one person that can't? Yes, under any system.
Yeah.
Paper systems, web-based systems, and everything in between. There's probably somebody.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the old yellow SDS books; they were all in one location. So, say you couldn't get to the location for whatever reason. Where's your ready access?
Oh yeah, and I mean, when you have 12,000 SDSs crammed into binders with no reasonable way to purge those or to archive those things, nobody's going to find a data sheet. No. There is so much more likelihood that you can actually find a data sheet under a system like this. Yeah. I don't think we should discourage it. I think we should be encouraging stuff like this.
No, and that's one of the struggles I had before was, so I do paper SDS sheets. Well, I have crews as far west as North Platte and into Iowa. And so I guess if they need access, somebody can call and somebody else can look it up. But and I can argue that's not ready access. But with this, with either they have the decal or with Company Cam, I can put the QR code on the app and somebody could scan it off a different phone if they needed to in a pinch.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about NetSuites.
So it's one of those online service. So everything's in NetSuite, from our sales guys estimating to inventory to we can create anything we want, create forms that are fillable.
Okay, so I'm interested in the site assessment.
So
the site inspections.
I created both a near miss or a safety observation card for them to fill out that kind of has your basic options if it's an unsafe condition, unsafe act, and what happened and what could have happened. And then we did a site inspection report that we want every superintendent to do either for every crew every day. So it's got your basic questions on safety side. Your like ladder safety, is your ladder on stable ground? Is it 3 feet and above 3 feet and tied off? What safety system are they using? Are they using personal fall arrest, warning line, guardrail? It has, are there weather questions? Then it goes into some like more sales questions, or is the work order correct? That kind of thing. And then they hit submit, and then I can, on the back end, I can pull up and see, or are they following their, and one of the basic questions is, are they, what is their safety system they're supposed to be using, and are they compliant? And if it's no, I can see, and they'll write why, what they didn't do. And then I can work on trending that. So if we can find, if we have a specific crew that's having issues, if we have a specific location that's having issues, or they're doing well.
Okay.
I mean,
so do you build the forms in this then? You built the forms.
Well, I didn't we have a web designer.
Okay, but someone is building a form that they are completing?
Yep, you can access it. They have it on their phone or on their computer.
Okay, so all web-based again, or cloud-based, or whatever that.
I mean, so you have an app on your phone, or you can do it online.
Okay.
And I mean, it's like I said, we just switched to, we used an old system before, like we switched over this winter. So it's been a learning process for everything. But the nice thing about this system is, I mean, if you have your web developer or whoever build it, they can build whatever they want in there.
Okay. That sounds very cool. Is there a way then, so if you have multiple superintendents filling out multiple site assessments every day, is there data compilation?
Yep, I created a report. I'm still playing with it, so I can sort it by the superintendent, by the date, by the time, by location, or by the crew, or if it's just if they're compliant or not. If I just want to see the people who aren't compliant, I can just hit that and pull the report on that. And
you can find perhaps like if you have a high frequency of incompliance in a certain area, that maybe you can refocus some training or some efforts in that.
Change training, and then kind of go to that behavior-based safety, go out and see why we're having that issue. If they're not wearing, if that crew is never wearing their harnesses, just go watch them for a while and see what the issue is, why they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Or if it's, they're constantly having warning line or guardrail issues, find out why.
It's fantastic.
I mean, that way, because, I mean, at the height of our roofing season, we probably have between low slope, steep slope, gutter crews, we have over 20 crews, so I can't be everywhere. I mean, I usually try and hit every crew once a week.
Oh, that's tough, man.
I mean,
very tough.
If you have an injury, that takes 2 or 3 days on my week kind of managing everything there, and so then you can't, so being able to see the pictures on company cam and then getting the reports from the superintendent means I don't have to be everywhere at all, at all times.
That's fantastic.
So if I want to be out in the field, I can be out in the field as much as you want, be as active as you want. If you don't want to be out in the field, if it's too hot or too cold, I can sit at the office and kind of watch it from there. But it keeps you busy, but still allows you. So even if I'm at one place and somebody calls me and says, "Hey, Alex, we got an issue here," I can kind of see it from a distance.
Okay. So you can show this to me sometime?
Yeah.
Maybe like company cam or even the net suites that you've got set up on the safety side. I'd love to see it sometime, man.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll hook up and maybe just check that out because it is fascinating to me. As a dinosaur,
I can sit. I have at my desk. I have 2 monitors. My left monitor I pretty much keep on company cam during the day, so it'll just constantly just pictures. Like by June, it'll be pictures every few seconds. A new picture popping up from somebody, whether it's sales or a superintendent or a crew foreman taking pictures of the job site. So they'll take their progress pictures of the day, and as they're taking progress pictures, I can see, hey, that guy's not wearing his rope, and I can say, hey, fix this. I mean, and do it quickly without.
I love it, man.
And then you almost kind of get some peer pressure to it too, because everybody else can see it. And so it's funny, like, oh, I saw you comment on here, or my residential superintendents, they'll know I'm hitting residential jobs that day, so like, they'll see Alex is out in Lincoln today. we better button up so we don't get busted by Alex, kind of thing.
That's cool.
But sometimes that positive peer pressure is what it takes.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have GPS units in our trucks, and we kind of trend, like it can tell us events. So if it's a hard brake, hard acceleration, cornering, or if they're speeding, and we pull a report at the end of the week, and so we started publishing that report, sending that report out every week, and it became, for some guys, a positive peer pressure thing where, hey, why are you getting so many braking events this week, or why are you getting so many speeding events? And they'll fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, recognizing those issues without being told to recognize those issues.
Yeah.
And they fix it themselves without being told to do it.
Yeah. I love that too. I mean, those are incredibly more powerful than the policing, getting back to the very beginning, the negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
The gotcha thing is just such a bad approach to safety.
Yeah, when I told people I was leaving the city going to be a safety guy at a roofing company, and a couple guys were like, everybody hates the safety guy, right? And I'm like, hopefully not. I mean, we'll find out. Right. I mean, I'm sure there's days where, I got to be the dick. I mean, I got to write you up. I got to suspend you.
There are those days.
Because if you're not getting it, we got to figure out why, or hopefully you fix it, and if not, then we'll address that. But I'd much rather go out and be like, dude, you're doing it wrong. And a lot of guys respond better to that than just coming out and being handed a sheet that says go home.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I mean, and that way, it's not being scared when Alex shows up.
Right.
And
there's something that you alluded to in the very beginning, man. There is an underlying reason why people make the choices they do. Why on that occasion have you chosen not to wear a fall protection, or why on that occasion did you not do something? And that could very well be, it could be laziness, it could be disregard, it could be any of those things, but it could also be something that we have done or not done that has driven them to that choice. And we need to know that.
Yeah. One of the issues I run into, like I told you, we use the H-2B visa program where we'll get a decent amount of laborers from Mexico. And some of these guys have been coming back to White Castle for 15, 18, 20 years. So they're there every summer. Mm-hmm. And I've run into this both summers now where they'll start getting heat rash from the harnesses. And they're like, well, we're not going to wear them. And one of the guys, it took us a while to translate this and figure out what he meant. There was a spray that somebody got him that helped it. And it's a benzocaine-based spray that cools and helps it. Because they're like, we'll just not wear them. Like, you can't just not wear harnesses. Mm-hmm. I mean, I realize that's what's causing it, but we can't not do it both for your safety and for compliance.
For the company.
So we went out and bought this benzocaine dermoplast spray, and that's helped them.
Seemed to work.
Like you just got to recognize you can't just shut them down, but you got to find a compromise.
Right.
So that they're still willing to work with you.
Interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard that. That's the first time I've ever heard that comment, that in the heat of the summer, the harness was causing a rash that discouraged guys from wearing their harness.
I mean, I've gotten heat rash before, and it's uncomfortable. Some people call it prickly heat, and you get it, and they get it up on their shoulders. I mean, you're just wearing a T-shirt, and then it's rubbing on your shoulders all day. And it's 100 degrees out, and it's humid in Nebraska. So
that would drive you crazy.
Yeah, and I haven't had it from a harness, but I've had it from other things, and I recognize that, that's uncomfortable, and you're not going to want to do it.
Right.
But on the other hand, they have two options: either don't work and don't get paid, or actually, I guess 3 options: don't work, don't get paid, work and don't wear it, or figure it out, manage it.
Yeah.
So trying to find that, like, it's that we'll work together to make sure that everything is done and handle it and take care of you, while still doing it. I mean, I realize it's not going to be comfortable, but it's not going to be quite as uncomfortable if we help you out do it this way. So,
we have any time left, man? How are we doing for time? I want to leave with, do you have anything on the horizon, anything you're working on, any new technology, any new twists or anything, or any old school stuff? What's on the horizon for you? What do you want to do this summer?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, like I said before, there's more stuff we could do, but haven't. I think it's a lot more training. I kind of, instead of just the regular, hey, monthly, here's what we're going to talk about, trying to bring it in more small groups. Show me how you put your harness on, kind of thing. Like, I know you've been told how to do it, but I want you to show me so that way I can A, inspect your harness, and B, ensure that you are doing it correctly, because you may have been doing this for years, and I can see, well, you're not putting it on just right, kind of thing. I want to do some more small group stuff, and just continuing education. I mean, I know I'm going to. So
does that mean that you go to the crews and do that training, or do they come to you periodically? Or
Both.
How do you guys handle training like that?
So primarily we have 3 locations: Lincoln, Omaha, Grand Island. We do have an office in Kearney, but no crews are based there. So during the height of the season, we'll do the base training in Lincoln, and then we'll use Zoom or Teams for Omaha and Grand Island so they can view it, and we'll get them the quiz ahead of time. And it's usually we pick 2 topics every month, so bloodborne pathogens and HAZCOM, or ladders and fall protection, and then go through it, do a quick quiz. But yeah, I think I've done it sometimes where if they can't connect on Zoom or something comes up, I'll just go there, either go to Omaha, go to Grand Island and train them. And sometimes I do see it coming out better than just bringing everybody into a room. And then with COVID, it's been difficult because you don't want to bring 70 guys into one small room to do this. And so we've foregone written tests some months we've done safety training out in the parking lot, just talk to them out in the parking lot. So, but I think some guys do respond better to that small group, and so they can't just hide in the back of the room.
Right. And I do like the idea of the demonstration principle that you just mentioned. One of the things that we used to do when I was with OSHA, if I wanted to evaluate your HAZCOM program, for example, I would just ask an employee, can you tell me a little bit about this chemical and get me a data sheet for this chemical? Just exercise the system a little bit to make sure that it works, rather than flip through the program and all the other crap, man. You know, that's basically meaningless. But if I can get you to do that and you can respond correctly, that's a great testament to the program. So,
because I mean, we have a written program, like all of our fall protection plans and everything. We have a written program, but not everybody's read them or knows them. They don't need to know them, but they need to at least know the safety aspects of how it might apply to them. So they don't need to know like when I write my safety plans, I'll put in all the OSHA regs as to why we do this particular fall protection. They don't need to know that, but they need to know, how do we use a fall protection cart, the Raptor cart? There's all these D-rings on it. You know, you're only supposed to be using the 5 on the front. Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose.
Right.
So
excellent, man.
it's the small corrections and kind of working with them to figure it out that way.
Yeah. So now you're just basically refining what you've got in place rather than just adding more shit on top.
Yeah. I mean, because
I think that's important.
Sometimes they're working in construction. They don't need to know. They just need to know how it applies to them. They don't need to know the grand scheme of things.
Right.
And a lot of these guys, I mean, not to paint it a bad way, but they're doing construction for a reason. They might not be the most technically savvy person.
Yeah.
So just getting it there to them and getting them their basic needs is all you really need to focus on.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's completely different from manufacturing. I mean, if OSHA shows up to us, it's because they've already seen us doing something wrong. I mean, it's not, even if it's a programmed inspection, it's just, hey, Alex, OSHA showed up at the job site. All right, I'll come out and figure it out.
Right.
I mean, and if they show up, something's already happened. Usually, so.
Yeah, hopefully not too much.
No, it's funny. Like we had in 2020, they hit our sub crews 3 times. 2 of them were within 2 blocks of where one of the inspectors lived.
Of course, man.
So I know anytime we have a job site in that area, I will go check them to be certain, be like, he lives in this area. So you're going to do everything right today.
Well,
100%.
all that information is public. You could probably just create a map on one of your app-based systems that shows where all the compliance officers live.
So, I mean, and I've got a good relationship with them, so it's fine. But I know anytime we have a job site that's in that general area, I'm going to go check it in the morning just to be like, hey, we're going to play things extra right today.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that, man.
Play the game.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you have had any interactions with OSHA, I'm sure they appreciate the approach you're taking to safety. I know I would. I love what you're doing. It sounds great. Some of the innovations are fantastic and things that are way beyond me. So I appreciate your coming here and sharing some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to digest here, man. So you may have to come back at some point if that's possible, if your boss doesn't say never again,
I don't think you will. I mean,
because this stuff is fantastic. Yeah. I'm really excited about it, and keep up the good work. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I appreciate you having me.
If you do have any questions, you can reach out to Doug at FletcherSafety.com and send me some questions. I'll get them to Alex, or we can have them on again sometime and answer any questions you might have. Fantastic information. Keep up the good work, man.
Thank you.
And it's going to get busy here in another month or so.
Although it hasn't really slowed down. We haven't really had winter in Nebraska. I mean, I think this was the first week we had guys miss more than a day all winter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be
60s
warm this weekend and 60s next week. It's just, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not complaining, but it is crazy, man. There is going to be that other shoe's going to drop here at some point.
Yep.
But anyway. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Stay safe, focus on the mission, and we'll talk to you next week. Later.